how do you know when your relationship is maybe over? And in today's video, Diane and I are going to be talking about the signs and symptoms that your relationship is over, how to understand it. And it's not just one or two symptoms. There's several symptoms that we'll be talking about in this video. And I think the culmination of those symptoms really does paint a picture for you. And if that's the case, we can always work through things, but sometimes maybe it's not workable or there might be a disconnect in the relationship. What are some of your thoughts on that? You know, when you think about relationships and when something might not be able to be resuscitated.
Absolutely. So, I mean, to kind of, you know, spoiler alert, and consider the source, like, I actually think pretty much all relationships are salvageable, you know, absent massive abuse, neglect, you know, things like that. If both parties are willing to go all in and do whatever it takes to heal it. I mean, I've seen situations that looked like it was lights out and, you know, they're still married now and they love each other. So, you know, if both of you, and like I keep saying both of you for a reason, both of you, there's not one person that can carry all the weight. Mm-mm. If you're both willing to do what it takes, even if there's been an affair or, you know, something awful, it's savable. With that said, a lot of people will say, oh, I'm just not in love anymore. I'm not in love anymore. And they think that's, you know, the sign that the relationship is over. And that's actually not true. The feeling of being in love has been shown to last about 2 years. So shorter for some couples, longer for others, but about 18 to 24 months. And if you want to read more on that, Gary Chapman wrote an amazing book called The 5 Love Languages. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of the book, he talks about just what the science is and what researchers have found about that sensation of feeling in love, which is amazing. And I love it. And, you know, it's great to be in love, but it doesn't last. It's like a high. And, in the book, one of the things he talks about is like when people are feeling that in love feeling, they tend to be doing all 5 or speaking all 5 of the love languages that he describes in that book, which are words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and gifts, which is my love language. So, and then, you know, over time, people start to only speak the love language that they're comfortable speaking. So for some people, they're only comfortable speaking in acts of service, and that's how they show their love, which is fine. But if they're married to someone who needs words of affirmation, that person will feel unloved. And he refers to each person as having a love tank that can only be filled with certain fuel, and that fuel is that love language you speak. So when relationships look over, what really, more often than not, you're seeing is just 2 people whose love tanks have run out of gas. And so it looks like lights out, but it's really their tanks are just out of gas. So with that said, when we talk about relationships being over, it's also signs that the love tanks have been empty for too long. Mm-hmm. And so we'll just dive right in and yeah, so the first one that I want to talk about today is that, you know, sign number 1 that the relationship's over. You no longer respect one another. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe that mutual respect is a bare minimum, a non-negotiable, a must for any healthy relationship. And so if you don't respect your significant other, and you don't think it's possible to ever respect them again because of things you've seen or things that they've done or whatever, yeah, I would say it's pretty safe to say it's lights out.
Yeah, I think that's a deal breaker. You know, respect is really a bedrock of a relationship. And if you don't respect somebody, you can't even be really a friend to somebody if you don't respect them. So I really think that part of the marriage, part of the relationship, whatever that looks like, there has to be a friend component. And in that component has to be respect. And definitely feel like if that's not there and you can't get it back, I don't know. I don't think it's good.
And then the next one is that you don't accept each other. Mm-hmm. So if you feel like you have to be someone other than who you are, if you feel like you can't live your true life in your intimate relationship, you know, we're talking about signs your relationship is over. I mean, how can you even call yourself really in a relationship if you can't be yourself? And even if you're married to the person, if you can't be yourself because you fear rejection or because you know that they would reject the real you, I think that's another sign that
That's definitely a sign. And one thing, too, is that, like you said, there's no fast and hard truth here as far as it's always going to be this way or the relationship's going to end. But if there are some things that you're holding back from your spouse or significant other that you're fearful of them knowing, eventually it's got to come out anyway. And if you want to see what they're going to do, at some point we have to open up that lines of communication. But if you have tried to do that and they still don't accept who you are, that's definitely a deal breaker, because you can't be someone you're not.
Yeah, and so sometimes this shows up in relationships where there's a cultural difference, and East meets West in the marriage. Sometimes it happens when there's a major class difference. But it can also happen when you marry the girl next door or the guy next door, and you just grow up and your ideas change, because that's what happens as part of life. You change your mind about things, and they want to stay the same. So there can be a whole host of reasons why you might find yourself in a relationship with someone who doesn't accept you, or someone who you just don't accept. And it's up to you to either say, like, I'm going to change, or I'm going to try and meet them in the middle, or say it's over. The next one I want to bring up is a little bit more abstract, so just stay with me. But it goes to the idea of polarity and gender energetics. So for relationships to be balanced and harmonious, the masculine and the feminine energy needs to be balanced. And those energies are gender neutral, meaning the male partner can be the more feminine energy partner, the female partner can be the more masculine energy partner. All it really means is the feminine energy is the more nurturing, receptive, intuitive energy, and the masculine is the more doing, giving, performing, achieving energy. And so if you want to, really good breakdown on the difference between the two, Pat Allen's book, Getting to I Do, really breaks down fabulously. But when those energies are imbalanced, there's not harmony. So when there's an imbalance in masculine energy, meaning both partners are predominantly masculine in their energy, the way it shows up is constant power struggles, fighting. So when you see two couples that fight a lot, it often is because both are wanting to be the masculine. The masculine is the leader. The masculine is the one whose thoughts are preeminent. The feminine is the one whose feelings are preeminent. So keep that in mind. Think about which one you want to be. But constant power struggles, it's two masculines in a relationship. And that can happen in heterosexual or homosexual relationships. So this commentary is not just limited to one sexual orientation, even though we're saying masculine and feminine. That is completely gender neutral. If the feminine is imbalanced, meaning both partners are feminine, the way it shows up is there's a lack of passion. There's no sex, and more of like a roommate situation. And so it's important to be self-aware and know, do I want to be the more masculine or the more feminine partner? And then use that self-awareness and saying, okay, and seeking out a mate, if I want a harmonious romantic relationship, I need to find my opposite, so that there's that yin and yang and that balance.
Very true.
Yeah.
I like that. What's our next sign?
Well, so since I mentioned no sex, no sex.
Here we go, the big enchilada here.
Let's do it. So sex and money are often about things that have nothing to do with sex or money. They usually, if there is an issue, it often stems back to communication or control. And so if you're not having sex, then the question is, why aren't you having sex? And if the answer somehow relates to a power struggle or a lack of communication outside of the bedroom, that can be a sign that the relationship's over.
And no sex is a problem. And I've had clients that have, voiced that they haven't had sex for years. Sometimes 10 years. And, if you're voicing that you're wanting something and the other person's not willing to give it, you can't force it. You can't force somebody to have sex with you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's against the law.
That's right.
It's against humanity. But again, that becomes the conundrum too. If somebody's in a relationship and they're not getting some of their needs met, which would signify the other person, helping them meet those needs, again, that becomes a problem. That's where we see a lot of people stepping outside of marriage a lot. We see them stepping out for sex, as well as intimacy. as well as communication. You know, some people can't have, solid communication with their spouse. They can't talk about the deep stuff that they want to talk about, and so they go and find someone else that they can, having that emotional affair with.
But even the shallow stuff, like even feeling like their partner is a safe enough space that they can just sit on the couch and play with each other's feet and like whatever, like sometimes that connection is missing. And that's why I say with money and sex, 9 times out of 10, if there's an issue, the issue is really about communication or control struggles. And maybe just one more for this video.
Yeah, let's do one more, and then we'll go part 2.
So the last one I'll say, and this is one that has been an issue in my own love life in the past, before I started doing the work I'm doing now, is that you're often mean to your partner, even when you don't mean to be, and because that is a sign that if you're finding that you're just like really like just a jerk to them, even when you're not necessarily upset, it's often a sign that your love tank's empty. And so it's manifesting in passive aggressive or outright aggressive behavior because you're upset, because your needs aren't being met. And that is making you just be really short with them. And it's true the other in reverse. Like if your needs aren't being met, there's a really good chance your partners aren't either, which is making them be less than loving to you.
Very true. And we can talk about attachment styles in the future as well. We've done a lot of videos on attachment styles, and understanding how the anxious attachment and the avoidance as well. And sometimes when we're not getting our needs met, eventually we give up and we avoid the other person, and that even makes a greater divide as well. So we can talk more about that. But when we return, we'll be talking more of the other signs that the relationship might be on the rocks. It might be an end of that relationship. And so we will be right back. So stay tuned to that next video, and don't forget to live your true life.